Good morning. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, I asked my father where his family had come from. I knew some family history. I knew that both my maternal grandparents and my paternal grandparents had immigrated to the U.S. at the beginning of the 20th century, that both my parents were born in America, that my mother's family came from a shtetl near Minsk, and that my father's family came from Russia. Well, my father told me, using the little bit of Russian that he knew, that his family came to America from Kolonia Maidanya in Kamenets-Podolsk gubernia, and that their village was an agricultural colony where the Jews owned the land. Well, I was 9 or 10, as I said. I filed the information away in my mind, but I didn't think much more about it for many years. Well, fast forward about 40 years. I have a younger cousin, Ben, who around 1990 became very interested in genealogy. He began interviewing older family members about their recollections of life in Russia. They told him that our village was known as Yiddish Maiden, that it was between two larger towns, Derozhnya and Letichev, and that the land had previously belonged to a man named Zakrevsky. He consulted geographical reference books looking for our ancestral town, but he found no reference to a Yiddish Maiden, or the Russian version, Yevrevsky Maiden, near Derozhny or Letichev, but he did find villages with the suffix Maiden. In fact, Maiden is Russian for farm or field. In particular, on a 1917 Russian map, he did find a village called Staro Zakrevsky Maiden. Well, Staro is the Russian word for old. He decided this must be the place. He kept looking, and he located a translated entry from a Russian encyclopedia from 1906, which read, Staro Zakrevsky Maiden, Jewish agricultural colony in Podolsk gubernia, Letichev district, founded in 1846, 1897 census showing 595 residents, among them 519 Jews. Well, this agreed with what my cousin had been told by an elderly relative, namely that there were approximately 10 Gentile families in the town. Well, this brings us to my topic for the morning. What were these agricultural colonies? To set the stage, I have to remind you about some of the history and geography of Eastern Europe. In the 15th century, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania was the largest state in Europe. It included what is now Lithuania, Belarus, most of Ukraine, as well as parts of Latvia, Moldova, Poland, and Russia. In 1569, it merged with the Kingdom of Poland to form the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which was still generally referred to as Poland for short. And at that time, according to many estimates, about 3/4 of the world's Jews lived in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The southern portion of Poland was a generally sparsely settled area. It consisted largely of vast feudal estates owned by Polish noble families. The peasants working on these estates were largely Ukrainian, and the small towns on these estates, which were actually owned by these Polish noble families, were home to Jews who worked as leaseholders, middlemen, craftsmen, and managers for the Polish overlords. The far southeastern part of Poland was known as Podolia. It was a border territory between Poland and the Ottoman Empire. In 1648, Ukrainian Cossacks, who were Greek Orthodox in religion rather than Roman Catholic like the Poles or the Lithuanians, under the leadership of Bogdan Khmelnytsky, rose up against the Polish nobility. They committed mass atrocities against the civil population, including Jews, Roman Catholic clergy, and others. Tens of thousands of Jews perished. And in the wake of this revolt, Eastern Ukraine became allied with Tsarist Russia. The 18th century saw a series of wars between Austria, Prussia, and Russia, which resulted by 1795 in the partition of Poland between these three empires. The state of Poland ceased to exist, and Eastern Poland, with its large Jewish population, became part of the Russian Empire. Russia also expanded in other ways in the 18th century. Wars between Russia and the Ottoman Empire, and between Russia and the Tatar state of Crimea, which was a remnant of the old Mongolian Empire, brought the northern shores of the Black Sea under Russian control. In short, by 1800, the southwestern border of the Russian Empire consisted of Podolia to the west, Crimea, and the former Ottoman region immediately north of the Black Sea. This latter land was referred to as the Wild Lands, or New Russia, because in Russian eyes, this land acquisition was justified. It was viewed as Russia's equivalent to New England, or New France, or New Spain. Catherine the Great and her successors started a broad program of colonization, inviting European settlers to these newly conquered but sparsely settled lands. To summarize, by 1800, the Russian Empire had, one, acquired a large new Jewish population, and two, acquired much new land around the Black Sea. In 1802, Tsar Alexander I created a special commission to improve the condition of the Jews. The result was a decree of 1804. The Jews of Russia were to be grouped into 5 classes: agriculturalists, manufacturers, artisans, merchants, and minor bourgeoisie. The agriculturalists were permitted to buy and rent lands in all the western and southwestern provinces of the Russian Empire, and to cultivate the land themselves or with hired help. For those without means, the government pledged to provide 81,000 acres of land. All Jews that wished to become colonists had to present proof of possession of at least 400 rubles, with which to pay for land, implements, and household necessaries. In exchange for becoming agriculturists, Jews were given exemption from military service for up to 25 years, tax abatements, and offer of land at reduced prices. The first 7 of these colonies were established in 1806 in the area referred to as New Russia, the former land from the Ottoman Empire. By 1810, 1,690 families had been settled in these colonies. Unfortunately for the settlers, however, the officials in charge of the program selected land more suitable for cattle breeding and large-scale agriculture than for small family farms. This colonization was characterized by gross inefficiency on the part of the Russian bureaucrats, and the Jews soon found themselves stranded in settlements without any of the promised supplies needed for building homes, and most of the farm implements and seeds were stolen by local officials. However, many Jews did persevere despite the numerous hardships and became dedicated farmers. In 1831, there was an unsuccessful Polish uprising against the Russians, and the Russians began to strip the Poles of their land holdings in the part of Poland they had taken over after the partition. Consequently, a great deal of land in Western Russia became available to the Tsarist government in the 1830s and early 1840s. Simultaneously, for security reasons, Jews who lived within 50 kilometers of the Austro-Hungarian border were ordered to move east. During this time frame, 19 Jewish agricultural colonies were established in Podolia. Just to provide some perspective, from 1804 until 1865, when this program ended, between 400 and 500 Jewish agricultural colonies with about 100,000 residents were established throughout the Pale of Settlement. The first colony in Podolia was established in 1844, and it was Kolonia Staro-Zakrevsky-Maiden. It occupied an area of 1,700 acres. My cousin was able to locate a town census from 1854 containing the list of the 52 heads of household. Number 16 on the list is a man named Elia Grubstein. He was the great-grandfather of my father's mother. Number 44 on the list was Moshe Zinstein. He was the grandfather of my father's father, and thus my father is descended on both sides from original settlers of Yiddish Maiden, the first Jewish agricultural colony in Podolia. Both his parents were married in Maiden and came to America in 1904 from that town. The colonists worked hard to learn agriculture. Behind every house there was a large garden in which corn, potatoes, beans, and other vegetables were grown. Fruit trees were planted near each house, which yielded large harvests of pears, plums, and apples. The fields were sown with rye, wheat, tobacco, and some more vegetables. But unfortunately, the land that had been provided for the colony was rather poor in quality. The houses themselves were wooden with dirt floors. Most had thatched roofs, although some of the wealthier residents were able to build homes with shingled roofs and wooden floors. Of course, there was no plumbing or electricity. The nearest doctor was 7 miles away in the town of Derozhnya. Many of the colonists resorted to other ventures due to the difficulty of making a living. Some raised cattle, some operated mills that served the nearby villages. My great-great-grandfather, Moshe Zinstein, had a wine cellar and sold Bessarabian wine to the locals. His daughter, Gala, my great-grandmother, received that wine cellar business as part of her dowry when she married my great-grandfather, David Weinstock, in 1875. Another great-grandfather, Yehoshua Usher Feldberg, was a successful tobacco planter, leasing land for growing tobacco in some neighboring villages. By about 1890, the town had fallen on hard times. This was due partly to repeated droughts and the accompanying famines, and partly to the effects of natural population increase resulting in a shortage of land for farming. Many younger residents chose to join the large-scale emigration of Jews from Eastern Europe to England, to France, and especially to America. The town also suffered greatly from the effects of World War I, including pogroms and a severe typhus epidemic. After the Russian Revolution, as agriculture became collectivized, the town became a Soviet collective farm. When the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the Jews of Staro-Zakrevsky-Maiden were placed in the ghetto in the nearby town of Derozhnya, and the ghetto was liquidated on Yom Kippur of 1942. If you want to pursue this subject, I can recommend Wikipedia as an excellent source. There are lots of articles about Jewish agricultural colonies and about the history of the land. You can also try to find the 2-volume work called The Road from Letichev, which was written by my cousin Ben Weinstock and his co-author David Chapin. I hope you've enjoyed this talk, and I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.